Wow, and that's it. We are live, and the team is back again.
Good to be here.
Yeah, and this month I managed to make it into the right room, not and the same room as both of you. So that's good. That's a good start, I think. But yeah, I've just realised that I now match my butterfly in my backdrop here. But there we go. Never mind.
Good to be coordinated, Laura.
Well, absolutely. Obviously, I thought about that when I got dressed today. But yeah, so yeah. So here we are again. The trio is back and talking all things conviction. Conviction, interesting word. But I know you've seen some of my posts this week, and lots of people have been commenting on it. And I've been wrestling with this whole thing, as you know, from my poll of Monday. Which comes first? Vision or courage? Which is the one that is the cornerstone of impactful leadership? And the reason why I say it now is because I still haven't got quite to the answer, but I think it has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about this evening. And that is because I think that when things are not clear and it's uncertain and it's complex, it's really, really hard to have a vision. Really, really hard vision. We know there's something there, but it's hard to have a vision. So if we haven't got a vision, how do we start? I think there's something in my curly whirly brain that's going, courage starts, we get from that movement, we get the vision, that then it's the conviction that keeps us going. I don't know, but because I was thinking of when I was climbing up Snowdon and I couldn't actually see the top, and I kept thinking the top was there. I didn't necessarily have a vision per se. I just knew that there was a top, but I knew I had the courage to start, and I had the conviction to keep going to find wherever the top was. So as you can see, I haven't quite got to the answer yet, but my brain has been going round and round in circles, and rightly so. Somebody called me out earlier this week about, am I pushing a narrative? And I don't know whether I am. I'm just trying to understand where things are. But anyway, welcome to my curly whirly brain and the world that is conviction. So tell me, what does conviction mean to you guys?
Well, I'll let Dan go because I'm certain I have the answer.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Well, there you go. So then, now there is a man who has conviction.
I'm absolutely convinced.
Yeah, you see, and it's an interesting word, isn't it? Conviction. And what you're talking about there, Laura, about which comes first, vision or courage. It's chicken and egg, really, isn't it? Because in order to have a vision, you need to have courage, right? But if it's not a vision of staying safe and staying small and not doing very much, anybody who's got a real vision for their future needs to have had courage in order to get that vision, I think, right? So maybe the courage comes first. But for me, conviction comes from knowing.
Yeah.
Now, we live in a very uncertain world and very uncertain times, and we can't really ever really have too much certainty about the future, about what's going to happen. But what we can do is we can know ourselves. We can know our business. We can know our teams, right? And this is, I guess, where values comes into it. So knowing that your values, knowing the values of your company and your team, so then when times are uncertain, you can have conviction because you know what you're about. So you know the direction of travel. You're not certain about what the destination is always. You have an idea. But conviction comes from the values, from being grounded and centered in knowing what's important and why it's important. Because then out with the circumstances, you can then take those values and that put it anywhere, and then you can have conviction because you know what you're about. And if you know as a team or as a company, you know what you're about, even if the vision isn't clear, even if things are uncertain, you know the direction of travel. So you know the next step to take, because that's all we can really know because that's when clarity is revealed, right? When you start the momentum, when you start to move, when you start to take action. You know, I hear far too many people who are waiting around. Oh, Dan, I need clarity, and it's like, well, until you take some action and you start testing it, you're going to get clarity. Postman Pat's not going to deliver it through the post for you. You've got to do something, right? And I think this is where conviction comes from, is values, and also confidence. And confidence comes in doing. So again, having conviction is being brave and courageous, knowing what you're about, knowing what the team's about, knowing what the direction of travel is, and then making steps towards it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'd echo a lot of that. Mark, I know you have the answer.
Well, only smarties have the answer.
Well, for a start, I only got that about 2 years ago. Those smarties have the answer. I just couldn't get the thing. Sometimes every brain is curly worded, but anyway, for a start, right? Let me answer the age-old question: which came first, the chicken or the egg? The egg. The egg has existed long before the chicken existed. The chicken is an evolution of a previous creature that always existed, but the egg came first. And you see, when you talked about knowledge there, Dan, I was thinking about it from terms of knowledge, right? So there's a conviction, right? So I can answer that because I read someone else saying that, and I thought, you know what, you're right. So my knowledge has given me the conviction to answer that question in that space or time, rather than still to wonder. And I know the question is more about the egg the chicken came in or the chicken itself, right? But it is what you said. True. You kind of wrapped yourself.
You really want to make my brain even more curly.
Well, I think you started it that way, Laura. So we have to keep spinning.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to keep spinning it. But so I suppose you touched on a lot of the stuff that's true about it there, you know, and it is that courage thing, that because if we don't take a step, and to take that first step, it always takes a sense of courage, but it also takes a sense of trust. So, like, and the example that popped into my mind there when I was thinking of that, the trust, right, is, and we'll all know this film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And the bit where he is looking for the Grail and he has to go across, and there's a bridge there and he can't see it, and he has to walk across the invisible bridge, and he has to trust that the bridge is there. So he has to put his foot out and trust that it's there. But there's a knowledge that he's attained from the study that he's done as this archaeologist and from his own ability to do stuff, that he trusts that he can take that next step, even though he knows that next step is incredibly risky. Because I think conviction, the conviction we're looking for is in that space. Because there's a very dangerous conviction that the world is full of at the moment, like, and a surety that we're right about everything, that, you know, whatever it is, like, you look online and you can see it straight away, like the conviction. And I was thinking of today, Laura, as I was driving earlier on today, I was thinking, like, you know, who's someone in this world right now who has conviction? Donald Trump, 100%. His conviction, right? In uncertain times. He's trying to create certainty through his conviction. Okay, is it the right kind of certainty? Depends on your viewpoint, your political views, your attitude towards it, right? So what is the right conviction, you know? Because there's a danger in leading with conviction that is idealistic, you know? I like conviction. The proper conviction should still have that tiny bit of doubt about it, so that, you know, there's always room to grow, room to change, room to maneuver, room to do something different. Because if it's fundamental conviction, then we're always in trouble.
Yeah, I hear you, Mark. I think it's, you know, if it's conviction with an air of arrogance, like there is no scope for change, etc., then that takes on a slightly different frame. But, you know, as you're talking there, I'm kind of thinking of two very real instances that I'm working on right now. And, you know, I've stepped into a new chair position within the NHS, and, you know, there's a group of sort of 12 members, and, you know, sort of the conversation went a bit like this with one of them. You know, well, I'm going to do some understanding, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is how it's going to be. But exactly what are we going to do? And I was kind of going through, and I said, look, I absolutely believe that this is the way forward. Do I have all the answers right now? No, because I haven't had enough conversations, because I'm building from the ground up. This is a patient-driven initiative to bring about better health outcomes and experiences. And I said, so I don't know at this point, but I am convinced that this is the way to do it, and I've brought people on board. But this one person is really struggling with that I don't have the clarity of vision that this is what we're going to do by this time. And it's obviously making them feel quite apprehensive. The rest of the 11, that makes real good sense. They feel absolutely involved. And the fact that their voices are being heard, they feel more towards the conviction that I have. Because I said, look, I trust myself to go through the process. I believe collectively that we can get to the answer together. Exactly what that answer is, we don't have all the information at this point in time. So I can't give you that clarity that you want. All I can say is that I'm going to communicate openly and honestly with you. And I have experience of doing this before. Let's not beat around the bush here. Frankly, 10 years ago, if I decided not to have any conviction about being able to step into a new world, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. Let's just face it. But I believed in something. What that something was, I hadn't done. So I think it's back to your point, Dan, about a belief in oneself, a trust in oneself, and with every step, there is a building of confidence that you gain that you can do it. And so that conviction sort of builds on itself.
Yeah, and they're two great words that you used there, Laura. And I think on one of your posts this week, and you said, what are we going to talk about? What we're going to be talking about? And trust is absolutely something we're going to be talking about. We're all looking for certainty. We love certainty. We're attracted by and we find certainty really appealing. I think this is part of Donald Trump's appeal. He has real conviction. He backs himself 100%. He does not waver at all. I would love just a little bit of that sort of conviction in my life and in my business. And now, when we're talking about conviction, words like belief, trust, they come up, and it's about believing in yourself, as Trump does, trusting yourself, as Trump does. Whether that's misplaced or not, that's a different discussion, right? And what's the opposite of that? So I remember you asked me a question this week, Laura, and you said, what gets in the way of conviction? Fear, doubt. This is what stops us having courage, right? It is letting ourselves be overwhelmed by fear and by doubt, and allowing doubt to make us indecisive. And we become indecisive because we don't have conviction. Now, fear and doubt are natural. Fear keeps us alive. Doubt is always a good way of making us go, just have a second thought, right? Because often the second thought is better than the first thought. So a little bit of doubt is always good and it's healthy. But you've got to, if you have conviction, then fear and doubt are never going to hold you back. They're never going to be a problem, because if you're deeply rooted in your values and you know the direction in which you're headed, fear and doubt is not going to stop you. And the reason it's not going to stop you is because you have conviction, belief.
Yeah. Mark's very clearly in deep thought there, Mark.
No, look, it's such an interesting space, that belief. And I think I always like to go forward on the word belief, guys, because like self-belief can be taken back down too. And because self-belief isn't always true, it's a belief, like any belief. It's not always truth, right? Whereas the trust is the most important thing, the self-trust. And it's where experience comes into the conviction piece as well, because we trust that we have the ability and the experience to do the thing. But if we do it wrong, we trust that we can fix what we've done wrong. We trust that we can go again. We trust that we can, what's the word? Reorientate ourselves. So that if something has to be done a different way, and I think there's a part of that. So if we talk about conviction and leadership, right, and we all have to be CEOs of ourselves, we have to be our own self-leader, but that trust has to be in that knowledge of self in order for us to lead in that way for ourselves. Because if we can't do that, then we're always going to be doubting and always going to be stuck in that other space, that we won't allow ourselves to move forward and to push on. And I think that trust is the key part to that. With the courage is the key part to that conviction piece. Without that, we're not going to get there. We're going to do things without being sure. Look, sometimes we do things without being sure we're doing them as well to create that vision. But we're going to do things without doing them right because we're not sure we're doing them. If you know what I mean, between the distinction. Because if we have the conviction, right, well, this is what I'm going to do, as opposed to this is the right thing to do, you know, both can be just as important. But if we have that conviction that this is what I'm going to do, and we put ourselves into it because we trust in ourselves in that space, that conviction follows through. And I think as a leader, people can follow that conviction because they can see where it's coming from. They can see it's coming from the right space.
No, I hear exactly what you're saying, Mark. Roger just said, as leaders, we need to bring people on a journey, and having conviction for that journey is essential. Trump's conviction will run out when trust comes up. He is all about himself. Fear and doubt is needed to keep us in check. Absolutely right, Roger. That's the problem. Is there's no collaboration going on. And I guess, you know, if I go back to the example I used earlier on with the NHS example that I'm working on right now, I am continually having conversations with the group and bringing them along to ensure that, you know, I understand where their perspective is. So yes, I am absolutely full on believing that, you know, we can do it. Not exactly sure how, but I'm fully in belief of it. But I know that I'm bringing them along the way with me, because in that conviction and that collaboration, we get collective action. No one per se is left behind. And one of the conversations I've had in the last 24 hours with the police is much the same thing. Is what you don't want is this sudden rear view mirror surprise because you weren't actually incorporating what was within the rear view mirror. So to Roger's point around the trust element, well, people hook onto that as that person leads with conviction until such time as it doesn't quite go right and we don't trust anymore. But that's a far bigger drop if you haven't brought people along the way with you in that conversation who can be guiding you, understanding, they know the journey that you've been on, which makes that conviction far, far stronger for me.
Yeah, and it makes it something easier to follow and easier to get on board with, isn't it? If somebody's taking you in a direction with confidence and they back themselves, and again, it's that what feels like certainty, doesn't it? And even though as the leader, you probably are not going to ever have that certainty until you start taking the action, until you start moving in a direction, until you start making the changes and doing what needs to be done. But as the leader, you've got to be the one with conviction, because otherwise nobody's coming with you. You know, like Trump does. You know, you've got to get on the front foot. You've got to back yourself. You've got to know that you'll figure it out along the way. You know, as leaders, you can't have too much certainty, but what you can be certain of is your experience, your knowledge, and your values, and you can back yourself to work it out, to be resourceful. And if you're taking the team with you, if you're having that conviction and that self-belief and that trust, you know, that Mark's saying there, which is so important, and that starts with you. If you trust yourself, then the people coming with you are going to trust you too. And if you're all in that circle of trust, when you inevitably do have to pivot and be flexible and change slightly and move direction slightly, they're all going to come with you again. You know, as Roger quite rightly points out about Trump, sooner or later, the trust is going to run out because he's going to start reneging on his promises. He's going to change what he's talking about, and he's going to be bringing up a new set of lies. And people are going to be like, well, hang on a minute. You were taking me that way with conviction and certainty, and now you're saying it's that way. You know, you were telling me black was black, and now you're saying it's white. As a leader, if you've got that trust of the people behind you, when you turn around and you go, oh, do you know what, guys? I think I might have got this wrong. We're going to go that way. They'll all go, oh, okay, let's go that way. They're not going to go, hang on a minute, what's this person on about? I don't trust this now, because you've been open, you've been honest, and you've got trust. I mean, and that's for conviction. That's absolutely key.
I have to just call fake news on Trump's lies. You do realize that your banner is orange, Dan, just so you know. But look, you know, it's. I was just thinking there in terms of what you were saying, Dan. To add to that, like that trust, right? So if we look ourselves, right, instead of talking about what it is to have conviction, what do we look for, right? You know, when we're looking for someone to inspire us in that way and in that space, and like I was thinking, religious leaders are a very strong one in that, right? But then we waver towards that fundamentalist thing itself, you know. And there's an Irish guy that I would have read an awful lot, listened to an awful lot, a guy called John Moriarty. He's probably the most erudite Irish man of the last 100 years. His books are totally impenetrable. Like it took me a month to read one of his books there recently. It's just they're so difficult. But what he did, and this is where I think about it in terms of that idea of conviction and uncertainty, he traveled down all of the potential roads. He went down every road. Do you want to get that, Laura?
I don't even know why it's ringing. So apologies, folks.
He traveled down all the roads so that the story he tells is an authentic story of his experience traveling down those roads. So from our perspective, from looking at what is courage and what is conviction, we can entirely trust his conviction in those spaces because he has traveled those roads that we go, you know what, that's a road that I need and maybe I can travel, or you've already traveled that to tell us what the way is. And I think there's that part of it really. So to really lead with conviction is that you have to have had that experience and be able to be vulnerable enough to tell your truth in that experience and to speak to that so that we don't respond to that ideology and the danger of the ideology and fall in love with you and believe you and want to follow you, as opposed to listen and admire and go, that's right, okay, I can get on board with that because it aligns with what I think is right. And I think, you know, from because we look for those followers, and the world is kind of devoid a little bit of leaders. And if I bring it to the likes of Conor McGregor or Andrew Tate, who are heroes for young men these days, those guys lead with conviction in uncertain times, but like they're tapping into this male thing, this very machismo male thing of young fellas that they can't seem to experience. Like JD Vance said in America the other day that men can't be men anymore. Like, what do you mean men can't be men? Like, I know, Dan, you men's coach and you talk about positive masculinity, and like, you know, this is your space to be talking in too. But it's just that the conviction in those spaces is built on that house of lies too that we speak about, rather than it's based on truth and evidence and experience and seeing you being real, and therefore I know I can trust because there's reality to it.
All right, Dan, have you got some?
Well, I thought the word that Mark used there that that I'm going to pick out and that I really like when it comes to talking about conviction is alignment, right? And if you're going to be somebody who leads with conviction, you need to do so in alignment with your words, your thoughts, and your actions aligned, because that's how you build trust. You say you're going to do something and then you do it. That's conviction. Now, whether you turn out to be right, wrong, or otherwise will come out in the wash later on, right? But that's so key. I think that word alignment, for moving forward with some degree of certainty, even though you're uncertain about the outcome or the destination. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we find that certainty so appealing. And talking about the likes of Tate and Conor McGregor and these arrogant, I'm not going to swear, don't swear, Dan, don't swear, people, that we like that, though. We like that certainty. They're so certain that they know what it means to be a man, that it's about control and dominance and brute strength. They're so certain about that of course young men go, oh yeah, that's it. If I was a 14-year-old boy looking at Andrew Tate, I'd probably be like, yeah, oh yeah. And for a 14-year-old, you're forgiven. Anybody above the age of 16 who thinks that geezer's got anything decent to offer the world, give your head a wobble. Go and have a whiskey and a word with yourself, right? Because that is not what being a man is about. You know, that's not strength, that's weakness. You know, strength is conviction, is having courage, is knowing yourself, is looking after people and protecting people and getting everybody on board and taking them forward. Not forcing people, not controlling people, not bullying people. That is not strength, and it's not conviction either.
But I suppose the things that's going through my head is, and I think it plays back to the earlier points about, is it fear and doubt and all the rest of it that gets there. But how do we get to the place where, yes, that people want certainty. I get that to a degree, especially when the world is spinning so fast and it's becoming even faster. But how do we get to a place where, those people are, they are convicted, and then we just, are so convinced that they are, because of their conviction, we then follow almost like, sheep behind it.
Isn't it easier for someone to give you the answers than to do the work?
Yeah, I guess that's the thing.
I think that's where we fall to. Like if you want to talk about how uncertain our world is, like nowadays people think that the Earth isn't round anymore. Like, we went through a lot of history with people being burnt at the stake for trying to convince people that the world was round, and now we've come, excuse the pun, full circle on the whole thinking. But so I suppose there's so much uncertainty with everything, with all the things, and like, I'll go back to that guy Moriarty, right? And one of the things he said once was that there's nothing, he could find nothing he could lay his head on, nothing in all our history and all our philosophy and all our folklore and all our religion, nothing he could lay his head on as being ultimate truth and fact. And if we bring that to, I have a great interest in the sciences, right? And we bring that to the micro level and the macro level. At a macro level, we don't know how big the universe is. We think it could be infinitely expanding. That's not even possible to comprehend. At a micro level, at the quantum level, we're discovering more and more and more and more. And things are getting smaller and smaller. We're discovering the bigger links. So on those two levels, there's uncertainty, left, right, and center. Consistent, constant uncertainty. Even the very, people argue gravity exactly as it exists now. People argue against gravity. Say it's a theory. Yes, it's a theory, but a theory means it's the best possible answer for all the evidence that we have available. But it's still not a fact. So we live in a world of absolute uncertainty. So it's easy to see how people would gravitate towards someone who has certain views that can make it easier for us to be alive in the world, and make it easier for us to actually say, this is fine. And I know this is very much in the personal. We want to go back into the leading thing, but I think it's where it comes to it. So the way out of that is to actually do the work on our own, to actually do the work ourselves. To say, look, hold on a second. Is this right by me? Who am I? What do I need in this world? What's the important things for me in my life? What can I attach certainty in my life by saying, what are my priorities? Where am I my priority? What do I do? How do I live? How do I exist? How do I give back into the world? Do I have a family? What do I have? Like, what is it that will give me value in this world and give me certainty that how I'm living my life is actually honoring the life I've been given to live? And I think then, when you find leaders who live in that way, then they can lead with that kind of courage, because there's a natural strength in that, because it is that know thyself kind of strength. And from there, we remove that edge of uncertainty to the point where we can lead with that bit of certainty.
I think I absolutely 150% with you on that, Mark. What went through my mind as you were saying that was, that is the only certainty, is what we create ourselves from ourselves, as it were. What is it that we want, that we know about ourselves in order to be able to, as you say, know thyself. And yet we're not taught that. We have to, the ways that we're taught is obviously that someone else has all the answers, which doesn't help. And, the education system sets up that narrative, unfortunately. And I think, equally, then there's the fear and doubt that steps in, that stops us from doing it. One of the things that I was going to throw in there is, because from my own personal experience, and I see it in some of the people that I work with, is it's not always fear and doubt, an internal fear and doubt. It's an external people saying, no, you can't do that. That's wrong. That's the right way to do it. So it's actually other people trying to keep you in a, there's a right and a wrong way. the lady who I do my I'm Not Arty class said to me, I'm going to give you a word, but I know you're not going to use it because I just know you well enough now, Laura, because it's like there's like a wrong and a right answer, and therefore I just can't get my head around it. It's not me trying to be rebellious, it's just how my brain works. But throughout my years, I've had so many people saying to me, you can't do that. That's not possible. And I'm like, it is possible. Everything's possible. Because I've always had that belief in me. It's more than others. And I see this again and again with people that I have conversations with, that I work with, that it's not just about an internal thing, but it's about external individuals and environments that try to contain people's, creativity or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I did and I love this comment, by the way. I'll come to this in a minute. But I did a post this week about giving up the need to be right. And it was one of the greatest things I ever did was go, do you know what? I know nothing, and I don't care if I'm wrong. I used to have to be right always, and boy, was it stressful. And they are the people that I am the sort of person that would sow the seed of doubt in somebody else because I was so convinced I was right, and I had conviction and confidence in whatever I said and did because that's how I behave. Now I do it knowing I'm uncertain. We can't have certainty. There is no certainty. Science, we love science because it comes from a place of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. That's why we've gone, do you know what? Religion, that's not the meta narrative we want anymore because it's certain, because it's going, this is truth, everyone. And then, as Mark was saying, when we teach people to think critically and they go, hang on a minute, hang on. If this is that, does that equal that? No, hang on. And this is the thing, you see, and that Kieran there has commented about trust. And you can sow seeds of doubt in people if they don't trust themselves. If you don't trust yourself, then external things will cause you to doubt, will cause you fear. If you do trust yourself to work it out, to figure it out, to have the right knowledge and the right experience, then you can have conviction, even though you are uncertain. Because there isn't any certainty. There isn't. There is nothing we can pin our hat on, as Mark was saying there about Moriarty. He's right. There is nothing we can say that we can absolutely back that ideology, that idea, that thinking, that belief, and say it's certain. It isn't. All we can do is know ourselves, trust ourselves, and believe that we will do the right thing, and believe that we are doing the right thing for the right reasons, and have that conviction, and then have the flexibility to change along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sorry, go on, Laura. Well, just something that I was just thinking there too, that there's one word that I think is also important, and it's a word that, I'd be wary of using it too often because connotations and all that. And I think it kind of aligns with the Kieran's lovely comment, if I'm pronouncing your name right, and Miranda as well has touched on something very important there as well. And it's that word faith. And so we have faith, and part of the religious thing is people have faith, right? And faith is a very good thing. The fundamental part is the problem. I've never saw anyone who wasn't sure if God existed or not kill anyone on the back of God. It's the fundamental that's the problem. The faith can be a good thing, though. There can be a lot of power in that. If you bring that to an individual level, like I think back to, some good leaders I've been with, some good leaders I've worked with. And I remember it was in a new job and I was under pressure and doing something brand new. And the guy who was my boss at the time, he said to me, I have faith that you can do this. Don't worry. You've got faith in you. And that was a very powerful thing to hear from a leadership perspective, that you have faith in me. Okay, so what gave you that faith to have in me that I can do this, So that conviction was coming down to me. And it touches on Miranda's point there, by creating that environment to promote creativity and new ideas. If people tell you that they have faith in you, away you go. Like we say it to our kids, I've got faith that you can do this. Not that you can't do this. Like, you're trying to learn how to tie your shoelaces. So you'll never be able to do that. I trust that you can do it, and that allows us to make those mistakes and to continue and to go on. And I suppose when it comes to the leadership piece, that faith that we are passing on to other people, we have to kind of put that into ourselves. So it goes beyond that belief, because beliefs can be challenged, but faith is more of that trust piece a little bit. So it's not the certainty, but it's trust in us approaching that certainty by approaching faith?
No, I'm totally with you, Mark. Just going back to Kieran's point, from a very personal perspective, I mean, Dan, Mark, you know my story well. Kieran possibly doesn't, but I totally get the whole thing around losing self-trust. If I think back to my personal experience 10 years ago when the world imploded and I lost everything, it wasn't that I doubted myself. I never had a lack of doubt. The world, I knew it around me didn't exist anymore. And so I suddenly didn't trust the safety around me. So it gave me a feeling of, or a lack of self-trust. Now, in that world, and so absolutely to Kieran's point, it can be very easy to be swayed to people who think they have all the answers rather than actually some aligning with somebody who can give you credible answers, because we do look for others for role models and everything else. And so therefore it's finding the right role models rather than those who are actually going to set a harmful narrative for us. But I still come back, and obviously why Project Me came into being, but was because, as I said a little while ago, the world was telling me so much about how I needed to be, how I needed to show up.
What you should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I can't do that. That's not possible. And actually everything's possible. And so Project Me became the framework almost to ensure that I could build back my own personal inner trust, my own brand, as it were. And I call it brand me, in order to be able to step back out in the world. So I can totally hear what Kieran is saying. My challenge is that we should never, that needs to start far earlier in our education system. Not that we're going to go and head off into that direction, because I see it undermines people constantly.
Yeah.
Their lack of the sense of self, or the root network of a tree, as far as I'm concerned, that thing that allows us to be truly resilient and truly adaptable, whatever the weather has to throw its way. And to that point, then actually in a world where that network is really, really strong, the roots of our tree, to Miranda's point, this is the way that we can actually allow everyone to have creativity, to be able to generate new ideas, and be themselves ultimately. And for me, that is how we can actually harness all of our unique abilities, and actually, in my mind, all have that level of conviction.
Yeah, and that level of conviction comes from good self-esteem, from good self-worth, from good self-respect. That's, and as you said, Laura, our education system starts to wear that away straight away. Then you go out into the world that tells you how rubbish you are unless you buy this or buy that or buy the other. So that wears it down even more. You go into the world of work and you experience narcissists and bullies, and that wears it down even more. So how can you have conviction when you've got absolutely zero self-esteem? You don't trust yourself at all. So you can never have conviction. You're never going to, and the lovely word that Mark used, have faith. Because you can't have faith when you've got no self-worth and you've got no self-esteem, because you've got nothing to cling to. When the very first thing I talked about today was values, when you understand what you care about and why, what your priority is, that's an anchor for you. Yeah. Then from there, you get to have faith and you get to have conviction in a world where you can't guarantee anything, where it's always uncertain. And anybody that's selling you certainty, don't believe them. Ask the question, where is agenda? What do they want?
Exactly. And you're right, though. I often say to people say the only, it came up recently with a client, we're struggling to know how we can deal with uncertainty. Look, we get that the only constant in the world is change and uncertainty. We get that. But I said, it's it's ourselves. You know, at the end of the day, the only thing from the moment we're born to the moment we die, you know, not wishing to be totally depressing, is ourselves. So we have to get to know ourselves. We have to root everything in ourselves, because it is the only constant. The world, if we know ourselves intimately and can be really, really strong in the knowledge of who we are, that's where we start building our conviction. That's where we have that deep root network. And you know, that's where, to your point, Dan, you know, the conviction in what we're doing, because we're aligned with what matters most to us, and more importantly, what we want to feel. It doesn't matter what is going on in the environment around us, because actually we're driven by an inner need, and that's the conviction.
Yeah. So you're not going to fall for anybody else's rubbish.
No. And yeah, if you're learning something new, that's different, you know, that you're learning something new because there's clearly a gap, but that's different from following it because you feel that they've got it right and you've got it wrong.
I'm reminded of when I was, I don't know, I think I was 45, and I was walking along. I went for a walk on my birthday, like I always do on the beach, and I was going along ahead, this lovely thing, looking out over the sea, and I was just thinking, you know, going back about 25 years, or probably longer, 35 years, when I was about 10, my dad was about 43 or 44, and I thought he knew everything. I thought he had everything figured out. He just knew exactly what life was. There was nothing else to know. And as I was walking along, I apologized to him. I thought, but how different would it be to know that he was just as uncertain as I was? As I was walking along, and I was thinking, of course I'm uncertain, but what did he have value in? He put his value and trust into his family and into his community and into what he did in those spaces. And he lived his life through those spaces completely. So all the uncertainty he would have had about the world around him, this is where he got his certainty. And he was a great leader, and he led with conviction in these spaces. As we were talking earlier, I had examples of some of the things he did to actually use as these examples of leading conviction. But I think that's the better example in terms of course, we all have our doubts, and we look to others who think they all have this sense of certainty about anything, you know, but no, they don't. And that's the fantastic thing. No, they don't. You said something beautiful there a couple of times, Laura, about that's not possible. Everything's possible, you know, like it's a binary thing. It's back to that quantum physics. Like until you open the box in Schrodinger's cat, the cat's dead or the cat's alive. But until you open the box, it's both. So everything's possible. Everything's not possible or everything's possible. Either nothing's funny or everything's funny. You know, yet we live in that line in between everything, and that's where we live in between them. So the getting comfortable in that space is how we can be. And that's once we get comfortable with that uncertainty, comfortable being uncomfortable, then everything is a little bit easier because of it.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing, it's that whole, we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, don't we?
Mm.
You know, that's the whole line.
I used to say to myself all the time when I was calming myself down, I'd always say to myself, it's all right, mate, it's okay, you've got this under control. Now I say, it's all right, mate, it's okay, it's not under control, but that's all right. We're good with that. I'm not going to lie to myself. I don't have it under control.
And say what?
No.
Well, the rest is going to happen. Brilliant. Well, as ever, an amazing conversation. So just to close off, what final words of wisdom are we going to share? Go on, Dan. What one word or one statement?
I'll follow up from what I just said there, and it's get used to being uncertain, people, right? Life is uncertainty. Life is not black or white, this or that. It's grey areas, it's nuance. And as Laura said, everything and anything is possible. Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you believe that you can't, you are right.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to add to that, and anything else is figure-outable.
Yes.
Your word.
I think for me, the key is when you think you're right, just because you think you're right doesn't mean someone else is wrong. They're right from their perspective too. And it's very much a perspective thing. So, you know, you can trust yourself to be right, but you got to remember you're living your life. You're not living anyone else's life. So you got to live, and I think Kirana said there, you got to live attentively as yourself. You got to live your life for you in the best way for you. And everyone else, accept that everyone else is trying to do that too.
Yeah, we're all doing the best with what we have in the way that we can do it best.
Yeah, given our perspective and our point of view.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. It's lovely to see you guys again and look forward to doing it next month.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, anyone.